Ah, the tranquility of space. So relaxing. Now we can hear ourselves think. Put her into autopilot so we can look at the sample question we need to answer. Let's pull up the question on our dash screen. Okay, so for 20 marks, we need to write something imaginative using an extract as stimulus. Let's read out the extract. All of a sudden, it was like breathing with two lungs when she'd only ever believed she had one. An entire world opened inside of her, a thronging, thumping, insatiable world. The more her imagination fed it, the more it demanded. Then the question reads, use this extract as stimulus for a piece of imaginative writing that shares an aesthetic vision. You will be assessed on how well you craft language to address the demands of the question and use language appropriate to audience, purpose, and context to deliberately shape meaning. Let's have some starberry smoothies and break this down. Gosh, the galley in this astropod is so well equipped. Anyway, back to the question. It's always good to figure out how many moving parts or limbs a question has. You can do this by looking at the key words. It's also helpful to treat an exam question like an awkward octopus. The first limb is the extract. It opens with an analogy, which is when an author compares the current situation to a related example in order to better illustrate their point. The character in the extract hasn't literally just started breathing with two lungs instead of one. It's like she just started breathing that way. What could that mean? Inhaling, breathing, oxygen, freedom. She feels free. She feels better than she's ever felt before. Something must have been suffocating her up until this point. But what? The extract says a world has opened up inside and she feeds it with her imagination. That's a weird image. Oh, it's a metaphor. A metaphor is when one thing is described as being something else, even though it isn't literally true. She must have just discovered her creativity. Okay, so we could interpret the extract in terms of discovering creativity or talent. We don't need to be too literal with it, nor should we rewrite the extract in our response. We might borrow a word or two from it, but the extract is a stimulus. This is the second limb of the question. A stimulus is something that spurs our own imagination, a launch pad for our ideas. The best course of action is to focus on the key ideas in the extract: creativity, imagination, freedom, and use that as the basis for our writing. The third limb is the requirement for a piece of imaginative writing. NESA defines imaginative texts as texts that represent ideas, feelings, and mental images in words. An imaginative text might use metaphor to translate ideas and feelings into a form that can be communicated effectively to an audience. Imaginative texts are characterized by originality, freshness, and insight. In other words, our text should be an original work of mostly fiction that expresses ideas in new ways. We say mostly fiction because it's perfectly normal to draw on aspects of real life to create a more believable story. We will also include narrative elements like plot, characters, narration, and setting, and use language techniques to engage our reader. The fourth and final limb is the purpose of our piece, to share an aesthetic vision. You'll remember from Lesson 1 of our Advanced Module C rubric series that this is one of the 5 purposes of writing we examine in the prescribed texts. Aesthetic is a word that describes something beautiful, artistic, or visually appealing. So, when a writer shares an aesthetic vision, they'll focus on the inspiring beauty of an art form. It could be anything from music to visual art, architecture to fashion. But more often than not, sharing an aesthetic vision involves narrating or describing the art of writing. Well, that's if the work of Nam Lee, Colin McCann, Zadie Smith, Margaret Atwood, and Geraldine Brooks is anything to go by. Those Mod C superstars will help us with this task.